Welcome, friend, to this peaceful journey through time, where we gently unfold the extraordinary story of one woman who rose from the humblest beginnings to become the most powerful empress in Byzantine history. Tonight, we travel to 6th century Constantinople, a glittering jewel of marble and gold, where Theodora transformed herself from an actress to an emperor's equal partner. Whether you're settling in for the night or simply seeking a moment of calm, I'm grateful you're here with me as we explore this remarkable tale of ambition, intelligence, and imperial power. Have you ever wondered how a woman born into poverty could become co-ruler of the Roman Empire and reshape the very foundations of Byzantine civilization? The answer lies not in luck or circumstance, but in the extraordinary intelligence and determination of Theodora, who understood that survival in the treacherous world of 6th century politics required both cunning and courage that would make modern leaders seem like amateurs. What I'm about to reveal will transport you into the daily rhythms of Constantinople during its golden age, where political intrigue flowed through palace corridors like water through aqueducts, and where one woman's vision would influence an empire that stretched from Spain to Persia. This remarkable story spans decades of careful maneuvering, strategic alliances, and transformative policies that would echo through history long after the last Byzantine emperor had fallen. By the end of our journey together, you'll understand exactly how Theodora achieved what seemed impossible, rising from the theatre stages of Constantinople to the throne room of the Great Palace, where she would wield power alongside Emperor Justinian in ways that challenged every assumption about gender, authority, and imperial rule in the ancient world. Now, to truly appreciate Theodora's extraordinary ascent, we must first immerse ourselves in the world she inhabited. The year was 500 CE, and Constantinople stood as the beating heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, a magnificent city of nearly 500,000 souls, where the morning sun painted golden shadows across marble columns and silk-draped balconies. The city awakened each day to the sound of church bells echoing from hundreds of Christian basilicas, their bronze voices calling the faithful to prayer, while merchants in the great markets below began arranging their precious wares from across the known world. Theodora was born into this vibrant yet harsh urban landscape as the daughter of Acacius, a bearkeeper at the Hippodrome, the massive chariot racing stadium that could hold 100,000 spectators and served as the political and social centre of Byzantine life. Her earliest memories were filled with the thunderous roar of crowds cheering their favourite racing teams, the smell of sawdust mixed with exotic animals, and the constant awareness that her family's survival depended entirely on the entertainment they provided to Constantinople's demanding populace. The Hippodrome was far more than a simple sporting venue. It was a world unto itself, where political allegiances were declared through team loyalties, where emperors gauged public opinion by observing crowd reactions, and where careers could be made or destroyed in a single afternoon. The blue and green factions that supported different chariot teams also served as powerful political organizations, controlling everything from trade guilds to neighborhood militias, their influence extending into every corner of Byzantine society. Young Theodora's daily life unfolded in the shadow of these towering marble tiers, where her father tended to the bears and other wild animals that performed between races, providing comic relief and exotic spectacle for audiences hungry for entertainment. When Acacius died unexpectedly, leaving behind a widow and 3 young daughters, the family faced immediate destitution in a society that offered few legitimate opportunities for women to support themselves independently. Theodora's mother, desperate to maintain the family's connection to the Hippodrome and its steady income, quickly remarried and petitioned the Green faction to allow her new husband to assume Acacius's position. But politics in Constantinople were never simple, and the Greens rejected her plea, forcing the family to seek help from their rivals, the Blues, who welcomed the opportunity to gain experienced animal handlers while simultaneously weakening their opponents. This early lesson in the harsh realities of Byzantine politics would prove formative for young Theodora. She learned that survival required not just intelligence and determination, but also the ability to navigate complex webs of loyalty and rivalry that could shift without warning. She observed how power flowed through personal relationships, how public gestures could mask private calculations, and how even the most humble petition required careful consideration of factional dynamics. As Theodora entered adolescence in this politically charged environment, she began working alongside her older sister Comito in the theatrical performances that accompanied the racing events. The Byzantine theatre was a world of contradictions, simultaneously celebrated and scorned, where actresses commanded attention and admiration on stage while facing social stigma and legal restrictions in their daily lives. According to Roman law, actresses were considered barely above slaves in social status, forbidden from marrying into respectable families, and subject to regulations that limited their movement and activities. Yet the theatre also provided opportunities unavailable elsewhere for women to develop public speaking skills, dramatic presence, and the kind of charismatic authority that could captivate audiences and influence powerful men. Theodora threw herself into this challenging world with characteristic intensity, studying not just the mechanics of performance but the psychology of audience manipulation and the subtle arts of persuasion that would serve her throughout her remarkable career. Her daily routine during these formative years began before dawn, when she would join her sister in preparing costumes and rehearsing scenes for the day's performances. The work was physically demanding and emotionally exhausting, requiring her to master multiple roles and adapt quickly to changing circumstances as political events influenced the content and tone of theatrical presentations. She learned to read the mood of crowds, to gauge the political implications of different dramatic choices, and to present herself in ways that commanded respect despite her humble origins. The performances themselves were elaborate spectacles that combined comedy, pantomime, and political satire in ways that allowed audiences to express opinions and frustrations that would have been dangerous to voice directly. Theodora developed a reputation for intelligence and wit that set her apart from other performers, demonstrating an ability to improvise clever responses to audience participation while maintaining the delicate balance between entertainment and political commentary that kept performances popular without crossing lines that could provoke official censure. Between performances, Theodora observed the interactions of Constantinople's elite as they socialized in the Hippodrome's exclusive boxes and private reception areas. She studied their mannerisms, their patterns of speech, their methods of negotiation and alliance building, absorbing lessons about upper-class behavior that would prove invaluable when she eventually moved in those circles herself. She learned to recognize the subtle signals that indicated shifting political loyalties, the coded language that allowed sensitive information to be exchanged in public settings, and the complex etiquette that governed interactions between different levels of Byzantine society. Her evenings were often spent in the taverns and gathering places frequented by actors, athletes, and other performers, environments where political gossip flowed freely and where connections could be made with individuals from all levels of society. Theodora cultivated relationships with merchants who imported luxury goods from distant lands, with government clerks who processed official documents, with military officers who commanded frontier garrisons, and with religious figures who influenced public opinion through their sermons and theological writings. This diverse network of contacts provided Theodora with information and insights that few people of her social background could access. She learned about trade routes and economic trends from merchants, about bureaucratic procedures and legal processes from government workers, about military strategies and foreign threats from soldiers, and about theological debates and religious politics from clergy members. This comprehensive education in the practical workings of Byzantine society would prove essential when she later assumed positions of real political authority. As Theodora matured into her late teens, her exceptional intelligence and striking beauty began attracting attention from wealthy and powerful men who frequented the theatrical performances. These relationships provided her with opportunities to experience luxury and refinement that were far removed from her humble origins. but they also exposed her to the complex dynamics of power and exploitation that characterized interactions between the elite and those who served their entertainment needs. The daily rhythm of these relationships required Theodora to master skills that went far beyond simple companionship. She needed to understand the political pressures and personal insecurities that drove powerful men to provide not just physical attraction, but intellectual stimulation and emotional support, and to navigate the treacherous waters of court intrigue, where today's patron could become tomorrow's enemy based on shifting political calculations that had nothing to do with personal relationships. Through these intimate connections with Constantinople's power brokers, Theodora gained unprecedented access to information about government policies, military plans, and diplomatic negotiations that were supposed to remain confidential. She learned about tax collection procedures and their impact on different social classes, about trade agreements and their effects on various economic interests, and about foreign policy decisions and their implications for imperial security and expansion. More importantly, she began to understand how decisions were actually made in the Byzantine system, observing the informal consultations and private negotiations that preceded official announcements, the personal rivalries and factional conflicts that influenced policy choices, and the gap that often existed between public rhetoric and private motivations. This behind-the-scenes education provided her with insights into the mechanics of imperial power that few people outside the immediate circle of government officials ever acquired. The knowledge and connections Theodora accumulated during these years of careful observation and relationship building would soon provide her with opportunities to transform her circumstances in ways that seemed impossible for someone of her background. But the specific mechanisms of that transformation and the remarkable individual who would become her partner in reshaping the Byzantine Empire would require her to make choices that challenged every assumption about social mobility and female authority in the 6th century world. The stage was being set for an encounter that would change not just Theodora's personal destiny, but the entire trajectory of Byzantine civilization, as the ambitious young woman from the Hippodrome prepared to meet the future emperor, who would recognize in her the intelligence and determination necessary to govern the most complex empire on Earth. The encounter that would reshape the Byzantine Empire began in the most unexpected of circumstances, during the spring of 527, when Justinian, nephew of the reigning Emperor Justin, first witnessed Theodora's performance at the Hippodrome. The future emperor had arrived that afternoon, seeking distraction from the mounting pressures of imperial succession, but found himself captivated by something far more intriguing than chariot races or theatrical entertainment. Justinian was already recognized as the most intellectually gifted member of the imperial family, a man whose voracious appetite for learning had led him to master law, theology, architecture, and military strategy with equal facility. His private study in the Great Palace overflowed with manuscripts on every conceivable subject, from ancient Greek philosophy to contemporary Persian diplomatic correspondence, reflecting a mind that approached governance as both art and science. Yet for all his academic brilliance, Justinian possessed little practical experience with the kind of street-level politics that Theodora had absorbed through years of survival in Constantinople's entertainment districts. He understood how laws should function in theory, but had never witnessed their actual implementation in the crowded neighborhoods where most citizens lived. He could recite the proper procedures for tax collection, but had never observed how those procedures affected families struggling to maintain their livelihoods. When Justinian's gaze first settled on Theodora that afternoon, he was struck not merely by her physical beauty, but by the intelligence that animated her performance and the commanding presence she maintained, even while portraying humble characters in comedic sketches. Here was someone who possessed the practical wisdom about human nature and social dynamics that his theoretical education had never provided. Their initial conversation, arranged through mutual acquaintances in the weeks following that first encounter, revealed the extraordinary complementary nature of their intellectual gifts. Justinian could discuss the philosophical principles underlying just governance, while Theodora could explain how those principles played out in the daily experiences of ordinary citizens. He understood the theological debates that shaped religious policy, while she knew how those debates affected the faith and loyalties of Constantinople's diverse population. During those early meetings, held in discreet private settings away from the scrutiny of court observers, Theodora demonstrated her remarkable ability to synthesize complex information and provide practical solutions to problems that had frustrated government officials for years. When Justinian described difficulties with tax collection in certain provinces, she could explain the underlying economic and social factors that made compliance challenging and suggest modifications that would improve both efficiency and fairness. Her insights into the management of Constantinople's restive population proved particularly valuable as civil unrest began building throughout 527 and early 528. The blue and green factions that controlled neighborhood organizations were growing increasingly hostile toward each other, their rivalry extending beyond chariot racing into violent confrontations that threatened public order throughout the city. Theodora's unique background provided her with connections to both factions and deep understanding of their motivations, grievances, and internal power structures. She could explain to Justinian why certain government policies inadvertently favored one faction over another, creating resentments that manifested in street violence and political opposition. More importantly, she could suggest ways to address underlying concerns while maintaining imperial authority and public order. As their relationship deepened throughout 528, Justinian began consulting Theodora on an expanding range of governmental matters, recognizing that her practical intelligence complemented his theoretical knowledge in ways that produced superior policy decisions. Their private discussions became informal strategy sessions, where the future of the empire was planned through the combination of his academic expertise and her intuitive grasp of political realities. The daily routine that developed between them during this period established patterns of collaboration that would characterize their eventual co-rule of the Byzantine Empire. Justinian would typically begin each morning reviewing official documents and legal texts in his private study, analyzing problems and opportunities through the lens of established precedent and theoretical principle. Theodora would spend her mornings maintaining her network of contacts throughout Constantinople, gathering information about public opinion, factional activities, and emerging social tensions that might affect imperial policy. Their afternoon meetings became the crucible where abstract governmental theory met practical political reality, producing innovative solutions that neither could have developed independently. When Justinian proposed legal reforms based on philosophical principles of justice, Theodora could anticipate how those reforms would be received by different social groups and suggest modifications that would achieve the intended goals while avoiding unintended consequences. These collaborative sessions revealed Theodora's extraordinary capacity for strategic thinking and long-term planning. While Justinian often focused on immediate policy objectives, she consistently considered broader implications and potential complications that might emerge months or years in the future. Her theatrical background had taught her to think several moves ahead, anticipating audience reactions and preparing alternative approaches when initial strategies proved insufficient. The intellectual partnership that developed between them during these months also demonstrated Theodora's remarkable ability to master complex subjects through focused study and practical application. With Justinian's guidance, she began studying legal texts, theological treatises, and administrative manuals, quickly developing expertise that enabled her to participate meaningfully in discussions about every aspect of imperial governance. Her learning process differed significantly from traditional academic approaches, emphasizing practical understanding over theoretical completeness. Rather than memorizing abstract principles, she focused on understanding how laws and policies actually functioned in real-world situations, developing insights that often escape scholars who approach these subjects purely from academic perspectives. By the autumn of 528, their collaboration had become so integral to Justinian's preparation for imperial succession that courtiers began recognizing Theodora as his unofficial advisor and potential partner in governance. This recognition created both opportunities and dangers, as traditional aristocratic families viewed her influence with suspicion and concern about the precedent her elevation might establish. The practical challenges of their relationship intensified when Emperor Justin's health began declining in late 528, making Justinian's succession increasingly imminent. Roman law explicitly prohibited marriage between men of senatorial rank and women of theatrical backgrounds, creating legal obstacles that threatened to separate them precisely when their partnership was becoming most politically valuable. Justinian's response to this crisis demonstrated both his personal commitment to Theodora and his recognition of her essential contributions to effective governance. Rather than accepting the legal restrictions as insurmountable, he began working to change the laws themselves, using his influence with Emperor Justin to modify the regulations that prevented their marriage. The campaign to legalize their union required months of careful political maneuvering, as Justinian needed to overcome resistance from conservative senators while avoiding actions that might destabilize the imperial succession process. Theodora's role during this delicate period involved maintaining her network of popular support, while demonstrating through her continued advisory contributions that her elevation would benefit the empire rather than merely serving personal ambitions. Their daily routine during these crucial months became a careful balance between public discretion and private collaboration, as they worked together to address immediate governmental challenges, while simultaneously planning for the fundamental changes their partnership would bring to Byzantine imperial administration. The morning hours were spent in separate activities that maintained appearances of appropriate social distance, while afternoon and evening meetings allowed them to continue their essential policy discussions. The success of their campaign to change the marriage laws provided clear evidence of their combined political effectiveness, demonstrating that their partnership could achieve objectives that neither could have accomplished independently. The legal modifications required sophisticated understanding of both constitutional procedures and popular opinion, areas where Justinian's academic knowledge and Theodora's practical insights proved perfectly complementary. When Emperor Justin finally issued the decree permitting their marriage in early 529, the announcement sent shockwaves through Constantinople's social hierarchy, while also generating genuine enthusiasm among common citizens who viewed Theodora's elevation as evidence that merit and intelligence could triumph over birth and social prejudice. Their wedding ceremony later that year became a symbolic moment that encapsulated the broader transformation of Byzantine imperial governance they were beginning to implement, combining traditional imperial grandeur with innovative approaches to political authority that would influence the empire's development for generations to come. The wedding ceremony of Justinian and Theodora in 529 transformed the Great Palace into a spectacle that merged centuries of imperial tradition with unprecedented innovation. As dawn broke over the Bosphorus, hundreds of servants began preparing the palace halls with silk tapestries from China, pearls from the Red Sea, and golden vessels that caught the morning light streaming through towering windows. The ceremony itself would take place in the palace's private chapel, but its implications would resonate throughout every corner of the empire. Theodora's transformation on her wedding day exemplified the remarkable journey she had completed, from the hippodrome's dusty floors to the empire's most sacred spaces. Her wedding attire, crafted by the finest artisans in Constantinople, incorporated elements that honored both her humble origins and her extraordinary destination. The purple silk of her gown, reserved by ancient law for imperial use, was embroidered with golden threads that depicted scenes of triumph and renewal, while her crown featured emeralds from Egypt and sapphires from India. The daily preparation for this momentous occasion had required weeks of careful coordination between court officials, religious authorities, and the countless craftsmen whose skills were needed to create appropriate ceremonial elements. Theodora personally supervised many of these arrangements, demonstrating the attention to detail and organizational capabilities that would characterize her approach to imperial administration. As the ceremony commenced, guests from across the empire witnessed something unprecedented in Roman history. Never before had an emperor married someone of such humble background, and never before had a bride approached the altar with such obvious intelligence and political sophistication. The traditional wedding vows were exchanged, but everyone present understood they were witnessing the creation of a new form of imperial partnership that would challenge fundamental assumptions about governance and authority. The weeks following their marriage established new patterns of daily life in the Great Palace that reflected their collaborative approach to imperial rule. Justinian and Theodora's morning routines began before sunrise, when they would meet in the palace's private chambers to review reports from provincial governors, military commanders, and diplomatic representatives. These early morning sessions became legendary among court officials for their intensity and comprehensive scope. Theodora's contributions to these daily briefings demonstrated her remarkable capacity for synthesizing complex information from multiple sources and identifying patterns that might escape less experienced observers. Her network of contacts throughout Constantinople continued to provide valuable intelligence about public opinion, economic conditions, and potential security threats that formal governmental channels often missed or reported too late. Their breakfast meetings in the imperial dining hall became informal policy seminars where the day's most pressing decisions were debated and refined. Court officials learned to arrive prepared for detailed questioning about their reports and recommendations, as both Justinian and Theodora demanded thorough understanding of issues before making commitments that would affect millions of imperial subjects. The administrative innovations they implemented during their first months of marriage revealed the extraordinary complementary nature of their governing styles. Justinian's approach emphasized systematic legal reform and comprehensive policy development, while Theodora focused on practical implementation and popular acceptance of governmental initiatives. Together, they created an administrative system that was both theoretically sophisticated and practically effective. Their daily schedule during this period typically included separate morning activities that allowed each to pursue their specialized interests and responsibilities. Justinian spent these hours working with legal scholars and government administrators on the massive compilation of Roman law that would become known as the Corpus Juris Civilis. His private study became a workshop where centuries of legal precedent were analyzed, organized, and synthesized into coherent principles that could guide imperial administration for generations. Theodora used her morning hours to maintain the extensive network of contacts and informants that provided her with insights into conditions throughout the empire. Her daily meetings included representatives from trade guilds, religious communities, neighborhood organizations, and provincial administrators who could report on local conditions and popular reactions to imperial policies. These sessions took place in various locations throughout the palace complex, from formal reception halls to private gardens, where sensitive discussions could proceed without observation. The afternoon hours brought Justinian and Theodora together for their most important collaborative work, as they reviewed the information and insights each had gathered during their separate morning activities. These sessions typically began in the palace's map room, where large charts and diagrams allowed them to visualize the geographic and strategic implications of various policy options. Their approach to decision-making during these crucial afternoon meetings combined systematic analysis with intuitive insight in ways that produced remarkably effective results. Justinian would typically present the theoretical framework for addressing particular challenges, drawing on his extensive knowledge of legal precedent, historical examples, and philosophical principles. Theodora would then provide practical assessment of how proposed solutions might be received and implemented based on her understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. The evening hours were reserved for more formal court functions, where Justinian and Theodora appeared together as co-rulers of the empire. These ceremonial occasions served multiple purposes, allowing them to maintain the traditional pageantry that reinforced imperial authority while also demonstrating their partnership to officials and foreign representatives who needed to understand the new dynamics of Byzantine governance. Their joint participation in evening court ceremonies established new protocols that reflected their collaborative approach to imperial rule. Rather than following traditional patterns where the emperor dominated official proceedings, while his wife remained largely silent, Theodora participated actively in policy discussions and diplomatic negotiations. Foreign ambassadors learned to present their credentials and proposals to both rulers, recognizing that effective diplomacy required understanding and accommodating both perspectives. The daily management of palace life under their joint leadership revealed Theodora's exceptional organizational abilities and her commitment to efficiency in all aspects of imperial administration. She personally supervised the household staff, ensuring that court functions proceeded smoothly while also maintaining the security and confidentiality that imperial governance required. Her background in theatrical production proved invaluable in managing the complex logistics of court ceremonies and state occasions. The transformation of palace culture during these early months of their marriage reflected broader changes in Byzantine imperial administration that would influence the empire's development for centuries. Traditional barriers between different social classes became more permeable as merit and competence gained recognition alongside birth and family connections. The imperial court became a more dynamic environment where talented individuals from diverse backgrounds could contribute to governmental decision-making. Their daily interactions with court officials established new standards for imperial accessibility and responsiveness that contrasted sharply with the formal distance that had traditionally characterized relationships between emperors and their subordinates. Both Justinian and Theodora made themselves available for consultation and discussion in ways that encouraged innovative thinking and creative problem-solving throughout the imperial administration. The economic implications of their governing partnership became apparent through their daily attention to fiscal policy and resource management. Theodora's practical understanding of commercial activities and trade relationships complemented Justinian's theoretical knowledge of taxation and monetary policy, producing financial strategies that strengthened imperial revenues while supporting economic growth throughout the empire. Their approach to military affairs demonstrated similar collaborative effectiveness, as Justinian's strategic planning abilities combined with Theodora's insights into personnel management and popular support for military campaigns. Their daily briefings with military commanders became comprehensive assessments of both tactical considerations and broader political implications of various military options. The religious dimensions of their partnership emerged through their shared commitment to strengthening Christianity throughout the empire while managing the complex theological disputes that threatened church unity. Their daily consultations with religious leaders reflected their understanding that imperial authority required both political legitimacy and spiritual sanction, making ecclesiastical policy inseparable from broader governmental objectives. As winter approached in 529, their first year of marriage had established patterns of collaboration and mutual support that would define their approach to imperial governance for the next 2 decades. The daily rhythms they had created combined individual expertise with joint decision-making in ways that maximized their combined effectiveness while maintaining the dignity and authority that imperial rule required. The morning frost that began coating the palace gardens in December served as a reminder that their greatest challenges lay ahead, as the empire faced mounting pressures from foreign enemies, religious controversies, and social tensions that would test every aspect of their collaborative leadership. But the foundations they had established during these crucial early months provided them with the partnership and mutual understanding necessary to address whatever crises might emerge in the years to come. The imperial court that awakened each morning in 530 functioned like a vast organism, with Theodora serving as its beating heart, pumping life and purpose through corridors that had grown stagnant under previous administrations. Her daily routine began in the pre-dawn darkness, when she would slip from the imperial bedchamber to meet with her network of informants in the palace's hidden alcoves and servant passages. gathering intelligence that would shape the empire's decisions before most courtiers had even opened their eyes. These early morning encounters took place in locations carefully chosen for their discretion and accessibility. The palace bakery, where servants prepared bread for the day's meals, provided natural cover for conversations with merchants who could report on grain prices and trade disruptions. The scriptorium, where clerks copied official documents, offered opportunities to speak with administrators who understood the practical challenges of implementing imperial edicts in distant provinces. Theodora's approach to intelligence gathering during these dawn meetings reflected her theatrical training and her intuitive understanding of human nature. She knew exactly which questions to ask each contact, how to encourage honest reporting without creating fear of punishment, and how to synthesize seemingly unrelated pieces of information into comprehensive assessments of conditions throughout the empire. By the time the morning sun began illuminating the palace's golden domes, Theodora had already absorbed reports about everything from barbarian movements along the Danube frontier to religious tensions in Alexandria's crowded neighborhoods. This information formed the foundation for the policy discussions she would have with Justinian later in the day, providing essential context that official governmental channels rarely captured with such detail and immediacy. The transformation of her private chambers during these morning hours revealed the systematic approach she brought to imperial administration. Maps covered every available wall surface, marked with colored pins that indicated trade routes, military positions, and political developments across the empire's vast territories. Scrolls containing correspondence from provincial governors were organized by region and priority, allowing her to track ongoing situations and identify emerging patterns that might require imperial attention. Her personal staff during this period consisted of carefully selected individuals whose loyalty had been tested through years of service and whose discretion could be trusted with the most sensitive imperial secrets. These assistants helped maintain the complex filing systems that allowed Theodora to access detailed information about any region or issue within minutes, a capability that gave her enormous advantages in policy discussions and diplomatic negotiations. The daily briefings she conducted with these trusted assistants took place in her private study, a chamber that had been specifically designed to facilitate the kind of comprehensive analysis that effective imperial governance required. Large windows provided excellent natural light for reading documents, while acoustic features ensured that conversations could proceed without fear of eavesdropping by hostile court factions. During these morning sessions, Theodora would review intelligence reports, correspondence from regional administrators, and assessments of public opinion that had been gathered through her network of contacts throughout the empire. Her approach to processing this information emphasized practical implications over theoretical considerations, focusing on questions about what policies were actually working, where problems were emerging, and how imperial resources could be deployed most effectively. The economic intelligence she gathered during these morning briefings proved particularly valuable as the empire faced mounting fiscal pressures from military campaigns, infrastructure projects, and the massive legal codification effort that Justinian had undertaken. Theodora's contacts in Constantinople's commercial districts provided detailed information about trade patterns, price fluctuations, and business confidence that helped guide imperial financial policy in ways that maintained economic stability while supporting governmental objectives. Her network of religious informants offered equally crucial insights into the theological controversies that threatened to divide Christian communities throughout the empire. The daily reports she received about popular reactions to religious policies, the influence of various church leaders, and the practical implications of doctrinal disputes provided essential guidance for managing ecclesiastical affairs, without triggering the kind of religious violence that had destabilized previous administrations. As the morning progressed toward the formal court sessions that began each imperial day, Theodora would conclude her private intelligence briefings and begin preparing for her public appearances as Empress. This transition required careful attention to every detail of her presentation, from the selection of appropriate ceremonial garments to the rehearsal of key messages that needed to be communicated to various court audiences. The daily ritual of imperial dressing during this period involved dozens of servants and craftsmen who worked together to create the visual presentation that reinforced Theodora's authority and dignity. Her ceremonial robes were selected not merely for their beauty, but for their symbolic significance and their ability to communicate specific messages about imperial policy and priorities. Purple silk embroidered with golden eagles might signal military themes, while garments featuring religious imagery would emphasize spiritual concerns. The jewelry and accessories that completed her daily imperial presentation served similar communicative functions, with each piece carefully chosen to reinforce particular aspects of her authority and to honor specific constituencies within the empire. Pearls from the Black Sea honored the merchants who brought prosperity through trade, while gemstones from distant provinces demonstrated the empire's vast geographic reach and cultural diversity. The morning transformation from private intelligence coordinator to public empress required Theodora to master different aspects of her personality and presentation, shifting from the practical problem-solving focus of her dawn briefings to the ceremonial dignity required for formal court appearances. This daily metamorphosis demonstrated her remarkable ability to function effectively in multiple roles simultaneously, adapting her approach to meet the specific requirements of each situation. The formal morning court session that marked the beginning of each imperial day brought together hundreds of officials, petitioners, and foreign representatives in the great palace's magnificent throne room. Theodora's participation in these ceremonies established new precedents for imperial behavior that reflected her collaborative partnership with Justinian while maintaining the traditional pageantry that reinforced governmental authority. Her daily interactions with court officials during these morning sessions revealed her comprehensive understanding of imperial administration and her ability to address complex policy questions with both theoretical sophistication and practical insight. Ministers who had initially approached her with condescension quickly learned to prepare thoroughly for her detailed questioning about their department's activities and recommendations. The morning audiences with foreign ambassadors provided Theodora with opportunities to demonstrate her diplomatic skills and her comprehensive knowledge of international affairs. Her ability to discuss trade agreements, military alliances, and territorial disputes with representatives from Persian, Germanic, and African kingdoms impressed even skeptical observers who had initially questioned her qualifications for imperial authority. The daily routine of managing petitions from ordinary citizens during these morning court sessions reflected Theodora's commitment to maintaining imperial accessibility and responsiveness to popular concerns. Her theatrical background had taught her to read audiences and respond to their emotional needs, skills that proved invaluable when addressing the grievances and requests that citizens brought to the imperial court. As the formal morning sessions concluded and the court prepared for the day's legislative and administrative work, Theodora would typically spend a few minutes in private consultation with Justinian, sharing the intelligence she had gathered during her dawn meetings and discussing the implications for the day's policy decisions. These brief but intensive conversations ensured that their collaborative approach to governance remained coordinated and effective. The midday hours brought different responsibilities and opportunities. As Theodora shifted her focus from information gathering and ceremonial duties to the practical work of policy development and implementation. Her private meetings during this period typically included detailed discussions with administrators responsible for specific aspects of imperial governance, from tax collection and military logistics to religious affairs and urban planning. Her approach to these midday administrative sessions emphasized practical problem-solving and innovative thinking, encouraging officials to propose creative solutions to challenging problems rather than simply implementing traditional procedures. The collaborative atmosphere she created during these meetings generated new ideas and approaches that significantly improved the effectiveness of imperial administration throughout the empire. The daily meetings with provincial governors who happened to be visiting Constantinople provided Theodora with invaluable opportunities to understand local conditions and challenges that might not be apparent from official reports and correspondence. These informal discussions often revealed problems and opportunities that formal governmental channels had missed, allowing imperial policy to respond more quickly and effectively to emerging situations. Her systematic attention to urban affairs during these midday sessions reflected her understanding that Constantinople's prosperity and stability were essential for maintaining imperial authority throughout the empire. The daily reports she received about food supplies, public order, infrastructure maintenance, and commercial activities allowed her to identify and address problems before they could escalate into serious threats to governmental stability. The afternoon hours typically brought Theodora together with Justinian for their most important collaborative work of the day. As they reviewed the information and insights each had gathered during their separate morning activities and developed coordinated responses to the challenges and opportunities facing the empire. These sessions took place in various locations throughout the palace complex, depending on the specific issues being discussed and the need for privacy or access to particular resources. Their daily collaboration during these afternoon meetings combined systematic analysis with creative problem-solving in ways that produced consistently effective results. The complementary nature of their skills and perspectives allowed them to address complex challenges from multiple angles simultaneously, developing comprehensive solutions that neither could have created independently. The evening hours brought the ceremonial and social obligations that were essential for maintaining the relationships and alliances that effective imperial governance required. Theodora's participation in these evening court functions demonstrated her mastery of the subtle arts of diplomacy and political communication as she worked to build support for imperial policies while managing the competing interests and personalities that populated the Byzantine court. As darkness settled over Constantinople each night, Theodora would conclude her public duties and return to her private chambers, where she would review the day's accomplishments and begin planning for the challenges that tomorrow would bring. The daily cycle would soon begin again, with new intelligence to gather, new problems to solve, and new opportunities to strengthen the empire that had become her life's greatest achievement. The tranquil rhythm of palace life was shattered in January 532 when the blue and green factions, those powerful circus organizations that had shaped Theodora's childhood, erupted into the most dangerous uprising in Byzantine history. The morning began like any other, with Theodora conducting her usual dawn intelligence briefings, but by midday, the streets of Constantinople echoed with angry chants and the crash of breaking glass as decades of political tension exploded into open rebellion. The crisis known to history as the Nika riots started with what seemed like a minor incident at the Hippodrome, where both blue and green supporters had united in their hatred of imperial tax policies and corrupt officials. But Theodora recognized immediately that this was no ordinary civil disturbance. Her network of informants brought her reports of organized planning, hidden weapons caches, and coordination between faction leaders who had never cooperated before in their centuries-old rivalry. As smoke began rising from burning buildings throughout the city, Theodora found herself facing the greatest test of her intelligence and political skills. The rioters had chosen their moment carefully, waiting until significant portions of the imperial army were deployed on distant frontiers, leaving Constantinople vulnerable to internal uprising. Their demands went far beyond typical factional grievances, calling for the removal of unpopular ministers and fundamental changes to imperial governance. The daily routine of palace life collapsed entirely as urgent messengers arrived every few minutes with reports of new areas falling under rebel control. The rioters had seized key government buildings, including the city prefect's headquarters and several military arsenals, while spreading fires that threatened to consume entire neighborhoods. Most alarming of all, they had proclaimed a rival emperor, elevating a reluctant aristocrat named Hypatius to challenge Justinian's authority. In the palace's emergency council chamber, hastily convened as the crisis deepened, Theodora witnessed something she had never seen before. Her husband's confidence beginning to crack under the enormous pressure of potential defeat and exile. The military commanders who had rushed back to Constantinople painted a grim picture of their options, with most advocating immediate flight from the city before rebel forces could surround the palace complex completely. The afternoon debate in that council chamber would become legendary in Byzantine history, as various officials argued for abandoning Constantinople and establishing a temporary capital in Asia Minor until loyal forces could be assembled to reclaim the city. The practical arguments for retreat seemed overwhelming, given the rebels' control of strategic locations and their apparent popular support throughout Constantinople's working-class neighborhoods. Theodora listened to these discussions with growing frustration, recognizing that flight would mean not just temporary defeat, but permanent destruction of everything she and Justinian had accomplished during their brief reign. Her theatrical training had taught her to read audiences and recognize moments when decisive action could transform seemingly hopeless situations, and she sensed that this crisis represented exactly such a moment. When the council's debate reached its climax, with Justinian himself beginning to waver toward accepting the evacuation option, Theodora rose from her chair and delivered the speech that would define her legacy and alter the course of world history. Her words, preserved by court historians who witnessed this extraordinary moment, revealed the full force of her intelligence, courage, and absolute commitment to imperial authority. She began by acknowledging the genuine dangers they faced, demonstrating her realistic assessment of their situation, while rejecting the assumption that retreat represented their only viable option. Her analysis of the rebels' strengths and weaknesses drew on her intimate knowledge of factional politics and urban dynamics, revealing vulnerabilities that the military commanders had overlooked in their focus on immediate tactical considerations. The heart of her argument centered on a fundamental principle that would guide Byzantine imperial ideology for centuries: that purple makes the finest shroud. She declared her preference for death as empress over life as an exile, transforming what had seemed like a practical question about military strategy into a moral choice about the nature of imperial authority and personal honor. Her speech galvanized the wavering council members and restored Justinian's determination to fight for their throne, providing the psychological foundation for the military response that would follow. But Theodora understood that inspirational rhetoric alone would not be sufficient to defeat a well-organized rebellion that controlled significant portions of the capital city. The strategic plan she developed during the remaining hours of that critical afternoon combined her knowledge of Constantinople's geography and social dynamics with careful analysis of the rebels' political weaknesses. She recognized that the alliance between blues and greens was inherently unstable, based more on shared grievances than genuine cooperation, creating opportunities for imperial forces to exploit divisions within the rebel coalition. Her approach to suppressing the uprising emphasized surgical precision rather than indiscriminate violence, targeting rebel leadership while avoiding actions that might drive neutral citizens into active support for the rebellion. This strategy required detailed intelligence about rebel organization and careful coordination between military units and loyal civilian groups throughout the city. The evening hours of that fateful day saw Theodora personally coordinating the intelligence operations that would enable the imperial counterattack, working with her network of contacts to identify rebel meeting places, weapon storage sites, and communication systems. Her theatrical background proved invaluable in organizing deception operations that confused rebel commanders about imperial intentions and capabilities. The night that followed became a test of every skill Theodora had developed during her remarkable journey from the Hippodrome's dusty floors to the empire's highest authority. She remained awake throughout the dark hours, receiving constant updates from loyal agents throughout the city, while coordinating with military commanders who were preparing the decisive assault on rebel positions. Her daily routine during this crisis period compressed months of normal political activity into hours of intensive decision-making and crisis management. The morning briefings that usually took place in her private chambers were replaced by emergency consultations in secure locations throughout the palace complex, as security concerns made normal procedures impossible to maintain. The intelligence she gathered during these desperate hours revealed both the extent of the threat facing the imperial government and the opportunities that decisive action might create. The rebels had achieved impressive initial success through surprise and coordination, but their control over the city remained fragile and dependent on maintaining momentum that could be broken through well-timed counterattacks. The dawn of January 18th, 532, brought the climactic confrontation that would determine whether Theodora's remarkable rise to power would end in triumph or catastrophe. The imperial forces, commanded by the generals Belisarius and Mundus, launched their assault on the hippodrome, where tens of thousands of rebels had gathered for what they expected to be a victory celebration. The battle that followed lasted only a few hours, but its outcome would shape the remainder of Theodora's reign and establish precedents for imperial crisis management that would influence Byzantine governance for centuries. The rebels, trapped in the massive stadium where Theodora had spent her childhood, found themselves unable to escape or effectively resist the disciplined assault by professional soldiers. The aftermath of the Nika riots revealed the full extent of Theodora's political transformation and her mastery of imperial statecraft. The crisis that had threatened to destroy her authority instead demonstrated her indispensable value as Justinian's partner in governance, silencing critics who had questioned her qualifications for imperial power. The reconstruction of Constantinople that followed the uprising provided Theodora with unprecedented opportunities to reshape the physical and social landscape of the empire's capital city. The fires that had consumed entire neighborhoods created space for new construction projects that would reflect her vision of imperial grandeur and urban planning. The daily supervision of these reconstruction efforts became one of Theodora's most visible and successful contributions to imperial governance, as she coordinated with architects, engineers, and craftsmen to create buildings and public spaces that would serve the empire's needs for centuries. Her involvement in every aspect of the planning process demonstrated her comprehensive understanding of urban dynamics and her commitment to practical solutions that addressed real problems. The new buildings that rose from the ashes of the rebellion incorporated innovations in both design and function that reflected lessons learned during the crisis about the relationship between urban planning and political stability. Wider streets facilitated movement of military forces when necessary, while improved water systems and fire prevention measures reduced the city's vulnerability to both natural disasters and human sabotage. The months following the riots saw Theodora's daily routine expand to include regular inspections of construction sites and meetings with the various specialists whose skills were needed to rebuild Constantinople as a more beautiful and more secure imperial capital. Her attention to detail in these projects impressed even skeptical observers who had questioned her administrative capabilities. The Hagia Sophia, the magnificent cathedral that would become the centerpiece of Justinian's architectural legacy, received particular attention from Theodora during its planning and construction phases. Her daily consultations with the architects Anthemius and Isidorus reflected her understanding that religious buildings served political as well as spiritual functions, requiring designs that reinforced imperial authority while inspiring genuine devotion. The innovative engineering solutions that made the Hagia Sophia's construction possible emerged from collaborative discussions between Theodora, Justinian, and their technical advisors, combining theoretical knowledge with practical experience in ways that produced architectural achievements that seemed impossible to contemporary observers. The daily rhythm of palace life during the reconstruction period reflected the new confidence and security that successful management of the Nika crisis had brought to Theodora's position as Empress. Her morning intelligence briefings resumed their normal patterns, but now included comprehensive reports about construction progress and urban development that demonstrated the tangible benefits of imperial governance. The afternoon policy sessions with Justinian took on new dimensions as they planned not just for immediate governmental needs, but for long-term imperial objectives that the successful suppression of the rebellion had made possible to pursue. Their collaborative approach to decision-making had been tested under the most extreme pressure and proven effective, providing them with confidence to undertake even more ambitious projects. The evening court ceremonies during this period celebrated both the restoration of imperial authority and the beginning of construction projects that would make Constantinople the most magnificent city in the world. Foreign ambassadors who attended these functions witnessed clear evidence of the empire's strength and stability, carrying reports back to their home countries that enhanced Byzantine diplomatic influence throughout the known world. As spring returned to Constantinople in 532, Theodora could observe from her palace windows the daily progress of reconstruction efforts that were transforming her beloved city into something even more beautiful than what the rebels had tried to destroy. The smoke and chaos of the uprising had been replaced by the sounds of construction and the sight of new buildings rising toward the sky. The woman who had once performed on the Hippodrome stages now commanded the reconstruction of that same arena, along with every other significant building in the imperial capital. Her daily involvement in these projects demonstrated the remarkable journey she had completed from entertainer to empress, from someone who merely observed imperial power to someone who wielded it with confidence and skill. The lessons learned during the Nika crisis would influence every aspect of Theodora's approach to governance for the remainder of her reign, providing her with practical experience in crisis management and strategic planning that few rulers in history had ever acquired. The daily challenges of rebuilding Constantinople became preparation for even greater achievements that lay ahead in her extraordinary career as co-ruler of the Byzantine Empire. The golden age that emerged from Constantinople's ashes would witness Theodora's transformation from crisis manager to imperial innovator, as her daily routine expanded to encompass reforms that would reshape Byzantine society in ways that seemed impossible just months before. The morning sun that rose over the reconstructed city in 533 illuminated not just new buildings and wider streets, but a fundamentally different approach to imperial governance that placed unprecedented emphasis on social justice and legal equality. Theodora's dawn meetings during this period took on new urgency and scope, as her network of informants brought reports about conditions throughout the empire that demanded immediate attention. The intelligence she gathered revealed systematic injustices and administrative failures that previous emperors had ignored or failed to understand, creating opportunities for reforms that would establish her reputation as one of history's most progressive rulers. The daily briefings she conducted in her private chambers now included detailed discussions about the legal status of women throughout the empire, as Theodora began developing comprehensive legislation that would protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation and abuse. Her own experiences had taught her about the harsh realities facing women without family connections or independent resources, making her uniquely qualified to understand and address problems that male legislators had never considered. Her morning consultations with legal scholars and government officials revealed shocking gaps in existing laws that left entire categories of imperial subjects without adequate protection or recourse when their rights were violated. The daily reports she received about conditions in Constantinople's poorest neighborhoods provided evidence of systematic exploitation that demanded immediate governmental intervention. The systematic approach Theodora brought to legal reform during this period reflected her comprehensive understanding of how abstract principles needed to be translated into practical policies that could be implemented effectively throughout the empire's vast territories. Her theatrical background had taught her to consider how audiences would receive and interpret different messages, skills that proved invaluable when crafting legislation that needed popular support to succeed. The daily meetings she held with representatives from women's religious communities provided crucial insights into the specific challenges facing different groups of imperial subjects. Abbesses from monasteries throughout the empire shared information about the practical difficulties of protecting women who sought religious life as an alternative to marriage or family obligations that might prove dangerous or unsuitable. Her morning sessions with former prostitutes who had been rescued from exploitation revealed the urgent need for comprehensive legislation that would address both the symptoms and causes of systematic abuse. These conversations took place in secure locations within the palace complex, as the sensitive nature of the discussions required absolute confidentiality to protect the women who were sharing their experiences. The daily routine of legal drafting that occupied Theodora's morning hours during 533 and 534 produced legislation that was revolutionary in both scope and detail. Her laws prohibiting the sale of young girls into prostitution addressed problems that had existed for centuries but had never received serious governmental attention from previous administrations that viewed such issues as beyond imperial concern. The comprehensive nature of her legal reforms extended beyond women's rights to encompass broader questions about social justice and economic equality that affected all imperial subjects, regardless of gender or social status. Her daily consultations with trade guild representatives revealed systematic corruption in commercial regulation that was stifling economic growth while enriching a small number of well-connected officials. The morning briefings she received from provincial administrators provided evidence of tax collection abuses that were driving productive citizens into poverty while failing to generate adequate revenues for imperial needs. Her approach to addressing these problems emphasized both immediate relief for victims and long-term structural changes that would prevent similar abuses from recurring. The daily coordination between Theodora and Justinian during this period of intensive legal reform demonstrated their remarkable ability to combine different areas of expertise in ways that produced superior results. While Justinian focused on the theoretical framework and constitutional implications of proposed legislation, Theodora concentrated on practical implementation and popular acceptance of new policies. Their morning policy meetings during this period typically began with Theodora presenting detailed intelligence about specific problems that required legislative attention, followed by collaborative development of comprehensive solutions that addressed both immediate needs and long-term objectives. The complementary nature of their approaches ensured that new laws were both theoretically sound and practically effective. The daily ritual of reviewing draft legislation took place in the palace's legal library, where centuries of Roman legal precedent provided context for the innovative approaches they were developing. Theodora's ability to understand complex legal concepts and identify potential implementation problems impressed even skeptical court officials who had initially questioned her qualifications for involvement in legislative matters. Her systematic attention to the practical implications of proposed laws revealed potential complications that purely theoretical approaches often missed. The daily meetings she held with administrators responsible for implementing new policies provided valuable feedback that allowed legislation to be refined before formal promulgation, reducing the likelihood of unintended consequences or enforcement difficulties. The morning sessions with religious leaders during this period focused on theological implications of proposed legal reforms, as Theodora recognized that successful implementation required support from church authorities who possessed significant influence over popular opinion. Her discussions with bishops and abbots revealed areas where proposed legislation might conflict with religious doctrine or traditional practices. The daily coordination between legal and religious considerations produced innovative solutions that satisfied both practical governmental needs and spiritual concerns about moral implications of various policies. Theodora's ability to navigate these complex intersections demonstrated her sophisticated understanding of how different forms of authority interacted in Byzantine society. The afternoon hours during this period of legal reform brought Theodora into direct contact with the individuals whose lives would be affected by the legislation she was developing. Her personal meetings with women who had been rescued from forced prostitution provided powerful testimony about the urgent need for comprehensive legal protection and social support systems. These daily encounters with the victims of systematic exploitation reinforced Theodora's determination to create legal frameworks that would prevent similar abuses while providing practical assistance to those who had already suffered harm. Her approach to these sensitive meetings demonstrated both compassion and practical intelligence, as she gathered information needed for effective legislation while providing emotional support to traumatized individuals. The systematic documentation of abuse cases that Theodora supervised during these afternoon sessions created an extensive record of problems that needed legislative attention. Her personal involvement in this process ensured that proposed laws addressed real situations rather than theoretical concerns, making the resulting legislation more effective and more likely to receive popular support. The daily meetings with former slaves who had been granted freedom through imperial intervention revealed additional areas where legal reform was desperately needed. The practical challenges of transition from slavery to citizenship required comprehensive support systems that existing laws did not provide, creating opportunities for innovative legislation that would facilitate successful integration into free society. The evening hours during this period of intensive legal reform were devoted to drafting and revising the specific language of proposed legislation, as Theodora worked with skilled legal scribes to ensure that new laws were clearly written and comprehensively designed. Her attention to detail during these sessions reflected her understanding that poorly drafted legislation could create more problems than it solved. The daily routine of legal drafting required careful attention to both immediate objectives and long-term implications, as laws needed to address current problems while remaining flexible enough to accommodate changing circumstances. Theodora's approach to this challenge emphasized clear principles and practical procedures that could guide implementation, even in situations not explicitly anticipated by the original legislation. The systematic approach she brought to legal reform during this period established precedents for comprehensive social legislation that would influence Byzantine law for centuries. Her daily involvement in every aspect of the drafting process ensured that new laws reflected both theoretical sophistication and practical wisdom gained through direct experience with the problems being addressed. The morning routine that had begun with intelligence gathering about immediate crises gradually evolved into comprehensive policy development that addressed fundamental problems in Byzantine society. Theodora's daily meetings with various expert advisors produced legislation that was both innovative and practical, combining ambitious objectives with realistic implementation strategies. The collaborative relationship between Theodora and Justinian during this period of legal reform demonstrated their shared commitment to using imperial authority for the benefit of all subjects rather than merely maintaining traditional privileges for established elites. Their daily policy discussions produced comprehensive reforms that addressed systematic injustices while strengthening overall governmental effectiveness. The daily rhythm of palace life during 534 reflected the enormous scope of the legal transformation that Theodora was orchestrating. As every aspect of imperial administration was being examined and reformed to create more just and effective governance, her morning briefings now included reports about the practical effects of recently implemented legislation, providing feedback that allowed continuing refinement of legal policies. The success of her legal reforms became apparent through the daily reports she received about improved conditions in various parts of the empire, as new laws began producing measurable benefits for previously vulnerable populations. Women who had been trapped in exploitative situations found new options for independence and security, while corrupt officials faced real consequences for abusing their authority. The afternoon meetings with provincial governors during this period revealed growing support for imperial legal reforms among administrators who had witnessed their practical benefits. The daily correspondence she received from remote regions of the empire provided evidence that comprehensive legal protection was strengthening popular loyalty to imperial authority, while reducing social tensions that had previously threatened governmental stability. The evening court ceremonies during this period of legal achievement provided opportunities for Theodora to demonstrate the practical benefits of her reforms to foreign observers and domestic officials. The daily reports about successful implementation of new policies created powerful testimony to the effectiveness of her approach to governance and social justice. As autumn approached in 534, Theodora could observe from her palace windows a city that had been transformed not just physically through reconstruction, but socially through comprehensive legal reform that addressed centuries of systematic injustice. The daily routine she had established for developing and implementing progressive legislation had created a new model for imperial governance that would influence rulers throughout the medieval world. The woman who had once been denied basic legal protections because of her theatrical background now commanded the most comprehensive legal reform program in Roman history, creating protections and opportunities for millions of imperial subjects who had previously been ignored or exploited by governmental systems. Her daily involvement in every aspect of this transformation demonstrated the remarkable journey she had completed from powerless performer to imperial reformer. The legal legacy that emerged from these months of intensive daily work would survive the fall of Constantinople itself, influencing legal systems throughout Europe and providing inspiration for future generations of reformers who sought to use governmental authority for the protection of vulnerable populations. The morning intelligence briefings that had once focused on immediate threats now revealed the long-term benefits of systematic legal reform. The daily collaboration between Theodora and Justinian during this period established new standards for imperial partnership that combined different areas of expertise in service of comprehensive governmental reform. Their shared commitment to justice and effective administration created a legacy that would define Byzantine civilization at its highest achievement, demonstrating what became possible when exceptional individuals combined their talents in pursuit of noble objectives. The golden afternoon light that streamed through the palace windows each day illuminated not just the immediate work of legal drafting and policy implementation, but the broader transformation of imperial governance that would make the 6th century remembered as the pinnacle of Byzantine achievement. Theodora's daily routine had become the engine driving this remarkable transformation, proving that individual dedication and intelligence could reshape entire civilizations when applied with consistency and wisdom. The transformation of Constantinople during the years following Theodora's legal triumphs became a living testament to her vision of what imperial governance could achieve when guided by both practical wisdom and moral purpose. Her daily routine by 535 had evolved into a complex orchestration of domestic policy, foreign diplomacy, and cultural patronage that would establish the Byzantine Empire as the most sophisticated civilization of its age. Each morning began with Theodora receiving detailed reports from her network of correspondents throughout the known world, as her intelligence gathering had expanded far beyond Constantinople's borders to encompass developments from the Atlantic shores of Spain to the silk markets of Central Asia. These dawn briefings took place in a specially constructed chamber where maps of unprecedented accuracy covered every surface, marked with coloured threads that traced trade routes, military movements, and diplomatic communications across 3 continents. The systematic approach she brought to international intelligence during this period reflected her understanding that effective imperial governance required comprehensive knowledge of global conditions and trends. Her daily meetings with merchants returning from distant lands provided information about economic opportunities, political developments, and cultural innovations that could benefit the Byzantine Empire through careful diplomatic and commercial engagement. The morning hours that followed these intelligence briefings were devoted to what Theodora called her workshop sessions, collaborative meetings with the empire's most talented architects, engineers, artists, and scholars who were transforming Constantinople into a showcase of human achievement. The Hagia Sophia, now nearing completion, had become the centerpiece of a broader cultural renaissance that touched every aspect of urban life. Her personal involvement in architectural planning during these morning sessions demonstrated remarkable technical understanding and aesthetic sophistication that impressed even experienced professionals who had initially approached her with skepticism. The daily discussions about structural engineering, artistic decoration, and functional design revealed her comprehensive grasp of how buildings could serve both practical needs and symbolic purposes, in ways that reinforced imperial authority while inspiring genuine admiration. The innovative construction techniques being developed under her supervision combined traditional Roman engineering with new approaches borrowed from Persian, Indian, and even Chinese sources creating architectural solutions that seemed to defy the physical laws that had limited previous builders. Her daily consultations with master craftsmen from across the known world produced technical breakthroughs that would influence construction methods for centuries. The morning meetings with master mosaicists working on the Hagia Sophia's interior decoration provided Theodora with opportunities to express her vision of imperial grandeur through artistic media that could communicate complex theological and political messages to viewers regardless of their literacy or social background. The daily discussions about color selection, symbolic imagery, and compositional arrangement reflected her sophisticated understanding of how visual art could reinforce governmental objectives. Her systematic attention to the practical details of artistic production during these morning sessions ensured that the empire's cultural projects maintained the highest standards of craftsmanship while remaining within reasonable budgetary constraints. The daily meetings with suppliers of precious materials, from Egyptian gold to Indian pearls, demonstrated her comprehensive knowledge of international trade and her ability to negotiate favorable terms for imperial purchases. The afternoon hours brought different responsibilities as Theodora shifted her focus from cultural patronage to the complex diplomatic challenges that were reshaping the Mediterranean world. Her private meetings with foreign ambassadors during this period revealed her remarkable ability to understand and address the concerns of diverse kingdoms and peoples, whose cooperation was essential for Byzantine security and prosperity. The daily diplomatic briefings she conducted in the palace's reception chambers combined formal protocol with substantive policy discussions that addressed everything from territorial disputes to commercial agreements. Her approach to international relations emphasized mutual benefit and long-term stability rather than short-term advantage, creating alliances that would prove remarkably durable even during periods of military conflict. Her afternoon consultations with military commanders returning from campaigns in Italy, North Africa, and the Balkans provided detailed assessments of strategic conditions and tactical developments that informed imperial planning for future operations. The daily reports she received about military logistics, local political conditions, and enemy capabilities demonstrated her comprehensive involvement in strategic decision-making at the highest levels. The systematic coordination between diplomatic and military planning that Theodora orchestrated during these afternoon sessions produced integrated strategies that combined negotiation with the credible threat of force in ways that often achieved imperial objectives without actual warfare. Her understanding of how different forms of power could be combined and applied selectively made her an exceptionally effective manager of international relations. The daily meetings with provincial governors visiting Constantinople during this period provided Theodora with first-hand information about conditions throughout the empire's vast territories. These informal discussions often revealed local problems and opportunities that formal administrative channels had missed or misunderstood, allowing imperial policy to respond more quickly and effectively to emerging situations. Her afternoon sessions with religious leaders from various Christian communities throughout the empire addressed the ongoing theological controversies that threatened church unity while providing opportunities for imperial mediation that could prevent religious disputes from escalating into political conflicts. The daily discussions about doctrinal differences and ecclesiastical jurisdiction demonstrated her sophisticated understanding of how religious authority intersected with imperial governance. The evening hours brought the ceremonial obligations that were essential for maintaining the relationships and traditions that supported imperial authority, but Theodora had transformed these occasions from mere pageantry into opportunities for substantive communication about governmental policies and achievements. Her participation in evening court functions combined traditional imperial dignity with accessibility that encouraged honest dialogue about imperial performance and popular concerns. The daily court ceremonies during this period showcased the cultural achievements that were making Constantinople the most admired city in the world, as foreign visitors witnessed architectural marvels, artistic innovations, and governmental systems that seemed to represent the pinnacle of human civilization. The evening presentations of new artistic works, architectural models, and scholarly achievements demonstrated the comprehensive renaissance that imperial patronage was fostering. Her evening meetings with the scholarly community that had gathered in Constantinople from throughout the known world revealed the extraordinary intellectual ferment that her cultural policies were encouraging. The daily discussions about philosophical questions, scientific discoveries, and historical research demonstrated the empire's commitment to learning and innovation that extended far beyond immediate practical needs. The systematic support for educational institutions that Theodora provided during this period created opportunities for talented individuals from diverse backgrounds to develop their capabilities and contribute to imperial governance, while also preserving and expanding the accumulated knowledge of classical civilization for future generations. Her daily involvement in curriculum planning and faculty selection ensured that educational programs served both intellectual and practical objectives. The nighttime hours, when official duties concluded and the palace grew quiet, provided Theodora with opportunities for private reflection and planning that allowed her to synthesize the information and insights she had gathered throughout each busy day. These solitary moments in her private chambers became essential for maintaining the comprehensive perspective that effective imperial governance required. Her personal study during this period contained the most extensive private library in the known world, with texts in Latin, Greek, Persian, Arabic, and other languages that provided her with access to diverse intellectual traditions and practical knowledge that informed her approach to governmental challenges. The nightly reading sessions she conducted in this scholarly sanctuary kept her informed about developments in law, philosophy, science, and literature that might have practical applications for imperial administration. The daily correspondence she maintained with scholars, artists, and administrators throughout the empire created an informal network of intellectual exchange that supplemented official governmental communications. Her personal letters, dictated to trusted scribes during the quiet evening hours, addressed everything from architectural techniques and artistic theories to philosophical questions and practical administrative problems. The systematic documentation of imperial policies and their results that Theodora supervised during these evening sessions created comprehensive records that would provide valuable guidance for future administrators, while also serving as historical testimony to the achievements of her remarkable reign. Her attention to preserving accurate accounts of governmental decisions and their consequences reflected her understanding that effective administration required institutional memory that could survive changes in personnel. The late evening meetings with her most trusted advisors provided opportunities for confidential discussions about sensitive political developments and strategic planning that required absolute discretion. These private consultations addressed both immediate challenges and long-term objectives in ways that formal governmental channels could not accommodate, allowing imperial policy to respond flexibly to changing circumstances. The daily routine that Theodora had established by 536 represented the most comprehensive approach to imperial governance that the Roman world had ever witnessed, combining systematic intelligence gathering with innovative policy development and effective implementation across every aspect of governmental responsibility. Her personal involvement in administrative details ensured that imperial intentions were translated into practical results that benefited millions of subjects throughout the vast Byzantine territories. The morning intelligence briefings that had once focused on immediate threats and opportunities now revealed the long-term benefits of systematic governmental reform, as reports from across the empire documented improvements in legal protection, economic opportunity, and social stability that were strengthening popular loyalty to imperial authority. The daily evidence of successful policy implementation provided powerful validation of her approach to governance. The cultural renaissance that emerged from her daily patronage activities was transforming Constantinople into a center of learning and artistic achievement that attracted talented individuals from throughout the known world. The morning meetings with architects, artists, and scholars had produced innovations in construction, decoration, and intellectual inquiry that were establishing new standards for human achievement in multiple fields simultaneously. The afternoon diplomatic sessions that had begun as crisis management had evolved into proactive engagement with neighboring kingdoms and distant trading partners that was expanding Byzantine influence while reducing the likelihood of military conflicts. Her systematic approach to international relations was creating a network of alliances and commercial relationships that strengthened imperial security while promoting economic prosperity. The evening court functions that had once been purely ceremonial occasions now served as forums for demonstrating imperial achievements to domestic and foreign observers who carried reports of Byzantine success back to their home communities. The daily displays of artistic, architectural, and intellectual accomplishments provided powerful testimony to the effectiveness of her governmental approach. The comprehensive transformation of imperial governance that Theodora had accomplished through her daily routine of systematic attention to every aspect of administration was creating a new model for civilization that would influence political development throughout Europe and Asia for centuries. Her personal demonstration that effective leadership could combine practical competence with moral purpose established precedents that would inspire future generations of rulers and reformers. The woman who had begun her remarkable journey as a performer in the Hippodrome had become the architect of governmental systems that served as the foundation for one of history's most successful and enduring civilizations. Her daily routine had evolved from simple survival strategies into comprehensive administrative procedures that maximize the benefits of imperial authority while minimizing its potential for abuse and corruption. The morning sun that rose over Constantinople each day now illuminated a city that had become the jewel of the medieval world, its marble columns and golden domes reflecting the vision and determination of an empress who had transformed personal adversity into imperial triumph. The daily rhythm of palace life under her guidance demonstrated what became possible when exceptional intelligence combined with unwavering commitment to the common good. The afternoon discussions that took place in her reception chambers now addressed questions that affected the lives of millions of people across 3 continents, as the Byzantine Empire had become a stabilizing force that promoted trade, learning, and cultural exchange throughout the known world. Her systematic approach to policy development ensured that imperial decisions reflected both immediate needs and long-term consequences in ways that maximized beneficial outcomes. The evening ceremonies that concluded each day provided opportunities for reflection on achievements that seemed almost miraculous when compared to the chaos and uncertainty that had characterized the empire before her rise to power. The daily evidence of successful governance provided continuing validation of her belief that intelligent administration, guided by moral principles, could create conditions where human civilization could flourish. The quiet hours after midnight, when Theodora finally retired to her private chambers, marked the end of daily routines that had transformed not just the Byzantine Empire, but the entire concept of what imperial governance could achieve when practiced with wisdom, dedication, and comprehensive attention to the welfare of all subjects, regardless of their social origins or personal circumstances. The legacy that emerged from these years of intensive daily work would survive long after the last Byzantine emperor had fallen, providing inspiration and practical guidance for future generations who sought to use political authority in service of justice, prosperity, and human dignity. The remarkable journey from hippodrome performer to imperial reformer had culminated in achievements that would influence the development of civilization itself, proving that individual determination and intelligence could reshape entire worlds when applied with consistency and noble purpose. The daily transformation of the Byzantine Empire under Theodora's guidance reached its zenith during the late 530s, when her morning routine had evolved into what contemporary observers described as a symphony of administrative precision. Each dawn brought messengers from the farthest reaches of imperial territory, their saddlebags heavy with reports that would shape decisions affecting millions of lives before the sun reached its peak over Constantinople's gleaming spires. Her private chambers during these crucial morning hours resembled nothing so much as the command center of a vast organism. with information flowing in from every corner of the known world through channels she had spent years cultivating and refining. The intelligence network that had once served her survival in Constantinople's entertainment districts now encompassed merchant caravans crossing the Sahara, diplomatic missions navigating the courts of distant kingdoms, and scholarly exchanges that brought news of innovations from lands so remote that their very names sounded like poetry to Byzantine ears. The systematic processing of this global intelligence required procedures that pushed the boundaries of what 6th century administration could accomplish. Teams of translators worked through the night to ensure that reports in Persian, Arabic, Gothic, and dozens of other languages could be presented to Theodora in clear, actionable summaries by the time she began her daily briefings. Maps that covered the walls of her private study were updated constantly with coloured pins and silk threads that traced the movement of armies, trade goods, and ideas across continents. Her morning meetings with provincial administrators who had travelled to Constantinople for consultation revealed the extraordinary scope of transformation that was occurring throughout the empire under her guidance. Governors from Egypt described irrigation projects that were bringing unprecedented prosperity to the Nile Valley, while officials from the Balkans reported that her legal reforms were reducing banditry and increasing agricultural productivity in regions that had been plagued by lawlessness for generations. The daily coordination between these diverse regional initiatives required Theodora to master details about everything, from desert navigation techniques to alpine construction methods, as her comprehensive approach to imperial governance demanded understanding of local conditions and practical constraints that could affect policy implementation. Her ability to absorb and synthesize information from such varied sources impressed even experienced administrators who had spent their entire careers specializing in particular regions or subjects. The morning hours devoted to architectural supervision during this period witnessed the completion of projects that would define Constantinople's skyline for centuries to come. The Hagia Sophia, now approaching its final stages of construction, had become the focal point of daily meetings where Theodora worked with master builders to resolve technical challenges that had never been encountered in previous construction projects. The innovative dome design required engineering solutions that pushed contemporary understanding of structural mechanics to its absolute limits. Her personal involvement in selecting decorative materials for the cathedral's interior demonstrated aesthetic sophistication that rivaled the greatest artistic patrons in history. The daily decisions about marble selection, mosaic composition, and metalwork design reflected her comprehensive vision of how architectural space could inspire both spiritual devotion and political loyalty through careful attention to psychological and symbolic effects. The morning sessions with master craftsmen from throughout the empire revealed the extraordinary concentration of talent that imperial patronage had attracted to Constantinople. Artisans who had once served Persian kings and Germanic chieftains now collaborated on projects that combined techniques from diverse cultural traditions in ways that created entirely new forms of artistic expression. The daily discussions about glazing techniques, stone carving methods, and precious metal working demonstrated the cosmopolitan character that the capital had acquired under her influence. The midday transition from architectural oversight to diplomatic responsibilities required Theodora to shift seamlessly between different modes of thinking and communication, as the afternoon hours brought meetings with ambassadors whose cultural backgrounds and political objectives required completely different approaches to negotiation and relationship building. The Persian envoys who arrived seeking commercial agreements operated according to protocols that had evolved over centuries of interaction between great powers, while Gothic chieftains from the northern frontiers expected direct, personal negotiations that emphasized honor and mutual respect. Her ability to adapt her communication style to meet the expectations of these diverse diplomatic partners while advancing Byzantine interests demonstrated remarkable cultural intelligence and strategic flexibility. The afternoon meetings in the palace's reception chambers became showcases for imperial sophistication that impressed foreign representatives while providing them with powerful incentives to maintain peaceful relationships with Constantinople. The daily diplomatic correspondence that flowed from these meetings created webs of alliance and cooperation that extended Byzantine influence far beyond the empire's formal boundaries. Trade agreements with Arabian merchants opened new routes for silk and spice commerce, while military cooperation agreements with African kingdoms provided security for imperial territories in Egypt and Libya. Her systematic approach to international relations emphasized mutual benefit and long-term stability in ways that created lasting partnerships rather than temporary expedients. The afternoon sessions with military commanders returning from campaigns throughout the Mediterranean provided Theodora with detailed intelligence about strategic conditions and tactical developments that informed imperial planning for future operations. The daily briefings about enemy capabilities, local political allegiances, and logistical requirements demonstrated her comprehensive involvement in strategic decision-making at the highest levels of military command. Her approach to military planning combined theoretical understanding of strategic principles with practical knowledge of how armies actually functioned in diverse geographic and cultural environments. The daily discussions about supply line management, local recruitment possibilities, and diplomatic opportunities that might reduce the need for prolonged military action revealed her sophisticated grasp of how different forms of power could be coordinated to achieve imperial objectives with minimum cost and maximum effectiveness. The evening hours brought different challenges, as Theodora presided over court ceremonies that had evolved from simple imperial pageantry into complex diplomatic and cultural events that showcase Byzantine achievements, while reinforcing political relationships essential for governmental stability. Foreign visitors who attended these evening functions witnessed displays of artistic, intellectual, and technological sophistication that served as powerful advertisements for the benefits of alliance with Constantinople. The daily court presentations during this period featured innovations in music, poetry, theatrical performance, and scholarly discourse that demonstrated the cultural renaissance imperial patronage was fostering. Poets from distant provinces recited verses that celebrated imperial achievements, while exploring universal themes that resonated with audiences regardless of their cultural backgrounds. Musicians performed compositions that combined traditional Byzantine forms with melodies and instruments borrowed from Persian, Arabian, and Western European sources. Her evening consultations with the scholarly community that had gathered in Constantinople from throughout the known world revealed the extraordinary intellectual ferment that her educational policies were encouraging. The daily discussions about philosophical questions, scientific discoveries, and historical research demonstrated the empire's commitment to learning and innovation that extended far beyond immediate practical needs into realms of pure inquiry and theoretical exploration. The systematic support for educational institutions that Theodora provided during this period created opportunities for talented individuals from diverse social backgrounds to develop their capabilities and contribute to imperial governance while preserving and expanding the accumulated wisdom of classical civilization. Her daily involvement in curriculum planning, faculty selection, and resource allocation ensured that educational programs served both intellectual development and practical preparation for governmental service. The night hours, when official duties concluded and the palace grew quiet, provided Theodora with essential opportunities for private reflection and strategic planning that allowed her to synthesize the vast amounts of information she absorbed each day into coherent policies and long-term objectives. These solitary moments in her private study became crucial for maintaining the comprehensive perspective that effective imperial governance required. Her personal library during this period contained manuscripts that represented the most complete collection of human knowledge then in existence, with texts in dozens of languages covering every conceivable subject, from agricultural techniques to astronomical calculations. The nightly reading sessions she conducted in this scholarly sanctuary kept her informed about intellectual developments throughout the known world, while providing her with theoretical frameworks that could be applied to practical governmental challenges. The daily correspondence she maintained with administrators, scholars, and military commanders throughout the empire created informal networks of communication that supplemented official governmental channels while providing her with intelligence about local conditions and emerging problems that required imperial attention. Her personal letters, dictated during quiet evening hours, addressed everything from technical questions about construction methods to philosophical discussions about the proper relationship between imperial authority and individual freedom. The systematic documentation of governmental policies and their practical results that Theodora supervised during these evening sessions created comprehensive records that provided guidance for future administrators while serving as historical testimony to the achievements of her remarkable reign. Her attention to preserving accurate accounts of imperial decisions and their consequences reflected her understanding that effective governance required institutional memory that could survive changes in personnel and political circumstances. The late evening meetings with her most trusted advisors provided opportunities for confidential discussions about sensitive developments that required absolute discretion, while allowing for strategic planning that addressed both immediate challenges and long-term objectives. These private consultations covered everything from intelligence reports about potential threats to preliminary discussions about policy innovations that might be implemented in future years. The comprehensive administrative system that Theodora had developed through years of daily refinement and adjustment represented the most sophisticated approach to imperial governance that the ancient world had ever witnessed. Her personal involvement in every aspect of policy development and implementation ensured that governmental intentions were translated into practical results that improved the lives of millions of subjects across vast territories spanning 3 continents. The morning intelligence gathering that had once focused on immediate survival had evolved into global monitoring systems that provided early warning about political developments, economic trends, and social changes that could affect imperial interests. The daily evidence of successful policy implementation throughout the empire provided continuous validation of her comprehensive approach to governmental administration. The cultural achievements that emerged from her systematic patronage activities were establishing Constantinople as the intellectual and artistic center of the medieval world, attracting talented individuals whose innovations in architecture, engineering, literature, and philosophy would influence human development for centuries. The daily meetings with creative professionals had produced breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously while creating works of enduring beauty and significance. The diplomatic relationships that had developed through her patient cultivation of international partnerships were creating a network of alliances and commercial agreements that strengthened imperial security while promoting economic prosperity throughout the Mediterranean world. Her systematic approach to foreign relations was reducing the likelihood of military conflicts while expanding Byzantine influence through peaceful means. The legal reforms that had begun as responses to immediate injustices had evolved into comprehensive codes that provided protection and opportunity for previously marginalized populations while strengthening overall governmental effectiveness. The daily reports about successful implementation of progressive legislation provided powerful testimony to the practical benefits of systematic attention to social justice. The military innovations that emerged from her strategic planning were creating new models for imperial defense that emphasized efficiency, professionalism, and coordination between different types of forces. The daily coordination between military and diplomatic initiatives was producing integrated strategies that often achieved imperial objectives without requiring expensive and destructive warfare. The educational institutions that flourished under her patronage were preserving classical learning while encouraging new discoveries and innovations that expanded human knowledge in directions that previous generations could never have imagined. The daily interactions with scholars and students from throughout the known world were creating intellectual exchanges that advanced understanding in every field of human inquiry. The economic policies that had emerged from her comprehensive analysis of imperial resources and needs were creating conditions for unprecedented prosperity that benefited all social classes while strengthening governmental revenues needed for continued expansion and improvement of public services. The daily attention to commercial regulation and infrastructure development was producing measurable improvements in living standards throughout the empire. The architectural projects that had begun with post-riot reconstruction had evolved into comprehensive urban planning that was transforming Constantinople into a model city that demonstrated the possibilities of intelligent governmental administration. The daily supervision of construction activities was producing buildings and public spaces that would serve imperial needs while inspiring admiration for generations. The woman who had once struggled for survival in Constantinople's entertainment districts had become the architect of governmental systems that represented the pinnacle of ancient administrative achievement. Her daily routine had evolved from desperate improvisation into systematic procedures that maximized the benefits of imperial authority while demonstrating that political power could serve noble purposes when guided by intelligence, determination, and genuine concern for the welfare of all citizens. The morning sun that rose each day over the Golden Horn now illuminated a civilization that had achieved unprecedented heights of cultural, intellectual, and administrative sophistication under her guidance. The daily rhythm of palace life demonstrated what became possible when exceptional individuals applied their talents consistently toward objectives that transcended personal ambition to embrace the broader welfare of human civilization itself. The quiet hours before dawn in 548 brought a different rhythm to Theodora's days, as reports from her physicians began arriving with increasing frequency about the mysterious illness that was slowly weakening her legendary vitality. These morning briefings, once filled with intelligence about distant provinces and diplomatic opportunities, now included careful discussions about treatments and remedies that the empire's most skilled doctors were attempting to combat the disease that seemed to resist every known cure. Her private chambers during these challenging months still buzzed with administrative activity, but the pace had necessarily slowed to accommodate the physical limitations that were gradually constraining her legendary energy. The maps that covered her study walls continued to be updated with reports from across the empire. But now trusted subordinates handled many of the routine intelligence briefings that she had previously conducted personally, allowing her to focus on the most critical decisions that required her unique insights and experience. The morning sessions with provincial administrators took on new urgency during this period, as Theodora worked to ensure that the governmental systems she had spent decades perfecting would continue functioning effectively, even if her personal involvement became more limited. The daily meetings with key officials emphasized training and documentation procedures that would preserve institutional knowledge and maintain policy continuity regardless of changing circumstances. Her systematic approach to succession planning during these morning hours reflected her understanding that effective governance required preparation for every possibility, including the eventual transition of authority to others who could continue the work she had begun. The conversations she held with Justinian about administrative procedures and policy priorities demonstrated their shared commitment to ensuring that the empire's remarkable achievements would survive any personal setbacks they might face. The architectural projects that had once demanded her daily personal supervision were now managed through carefully structured delegation systems that allowed construction to proceed according to her established standards, while reducing the physical demands on her time and energy. The morning reports about progress on various building projects provided her with detailed information about implementation while allowing trusted deputies to handle routine oversight responsibilities. Her continued involvement in artistic and cultural patronage during this period took different forms as she adapted her working methods to accommodate her changing physical capabilities. The daily meetings with master craftsmen and scholarly advisors became shorter but more focused, concentrating on the most important creative decisions while delegating routine administrative tasks to assistants who had learned her standards and preferences through years of collaboration. The afternoon hours brought diplomatic responsibilities that remained as demanding as ever, since foreign representatives expected to meet with the Empress personally rather than through intermediaries. Her sessions with ambassadors during this period demonstrated remarkable stamina and intellectual clarity despite the physical challenges she was facing, as she continued to conduct complex negotiations with the same strategic brilliance that had characterized her entire career. The daily diplomatic correspondence that flowed from these meetings maintained the comprehensive scope that had always characterized her approach to international relations, though she now relied more heavily on skilled secretaries and translators to handle routine communications, while reserving her personal attention for the most sensitive and important exchanges with foreign powers. Her afternoon meetings with military commanders returning from campaigns throughout the Mediterranean continued to provide essential strategic intelligence, though the physical demands of these briefings were managed through modified schedules that maximized her effectiveness while conserving energy for the most critical decisions. The systematic documentation of military developments and strategic planning that had always characterized these sessions became even more thorough during this period. The evening court ceremonies that had once showcased her remarkable stamina and commanding presence were gradually modified to accommodate her changing physical circumstances while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that foreign observers expected from imperial functions. Her participation in these formal occasions demonstrated continuing authority and intellectual vigor, even as the demands were carefully managed to avoid unnecessary strain. The daily court presentations during this period continued to feature the artistic, musical, and scholarly achievements that had made Constantinople famous throughout the known world. Though Theodora's role evolved from active supervision to ceremonial endorsement of works that had been prepared according to standards she had established over many years of careful cultural patronage, her evening consultations with religious leaders took on new dimensions during this period, as theological discussions about mortality and legacy became more personal and immediate rather than merely abstract policy considerations. The daily meetings with bishops and abbots provided spiritual support, while also addressing practical questions about how imperial religious policies should evolve in changing circumstances. The night hours, when official duties concluded and the palace grew quiet, became increasingly important for private reflection and personal preparation as Theodora contemplated the remarkable journey she had completed and the legacy that would survive her eventual departure from the earthly stage where she had performed so brilliantly for so many years. Her personal study during these quiet evening moments remained a sanctuary where she could review the achievements that had transformed not just the Byzantine Empire, but the entire concept of what imperial governance could accomplish when guided by intelligence, determination, and genuine concern for the welfare of all subjects, regardless of their social origins or personal circumstances. The systematic documentation of governmental innovations and administrative procedures that occupied many of these evening hours reflected her commitment to ensuring that future rulers would have access to the knowledge and experience she had accumulated through decades of intensive involvement in every aspect of imperial administration. Her detailed instructions about policy implementation and strategic planning would provide guidance for generations of Byzantine officials. The correspondence she maintained during these evening sessions with administrators throughout the empire took on new significance as she worked to ensure that regional officials understood the principles underlying imperial policies and could continue implementing them effectively, even without constant supervision from Constantinople. Her personal letters emphasized both practical procedures and theoretical frameworks that could guide decision-making in diverse circumstances. The late evening meetings with her most trusted advisors during this period focused increasingly on long-term strategic planning and institutional development rather than immediate crisis management, as she worked to establish systems that would preserve the empire's remarkable achievements while adapting to whatever challenges might emerge in future years. The comprehensive administrative legacy that Theodora was consciously creating through these final months of intensive work represented the culmination of a lifetime devoted to demonstrating that political authority could serve noble purposes when exercised with wisdom, competence, and genuine dedication to the common good, rather than merely personal advancement or factional advantage. The morning intelligence briefings that had once provided her with information needed for immediate decisions were gradually transformed into historical records that would help future administrators understand the global context within which imperial policies had been developed and implemented. The daily evidence of successful governance throughout the empire provided continuing validation of her comprehensive approach to governmental administration. The cultural institutions that had flourished under her patronage were now sufficiently established to continue their work independently, though she maintained daily oversight to ensure that educational and artistic programs would preserve the standards of excellence that had made Constantinople the intellectual center of the medieval world while encouraging continued innovation and discovery. The diplomatic relationships that had developed through years of patient cultivation were strong enough to survive transitions in imperial leadership, though she continued her daily involvement in the most sensitive international negotiations to ensure that Byzantine interests would be protected regardless of changing circumstances within the empire itself. The legal reforms that had begun as responses to immediate injustices had evolved into comprehensive codes that were now being implemented throughout imperial territories, with measurable success in improving conditions for previously marginalized populations. The daily reports about successful legal implementation provided powerful testimony to the enduring value of systematic attention to social justice. The military innovations that had emerged from her strategic planning were creating new standards for imperial defense that would influence Byzantine military organization for centuries. The daily coordination between different types of forces continued to demonstrate the effectiveness of integrated approaches to security challenges that combine diplomatic, economic, and military elements. The architectural achievements that had transformed Constantinople into the most beautiful city in the world were nearing completion during this period, with daily progress reports documenting the final stages of construction projects that would stand as monuments to imperial patronage and artistic excellence for generations to come. The woman who had risen from the humblest origins to become co-ruler of the world's most powerful empire was now working systematically to ensure that her remarkable achievements would survive and continue benefiting millions of people long after her personal involvement in imperial governance had concluded. Her daily routine had evolved into a comprehensive legacy-building effort that would influence the development of civilization itself. The afternoon discussions that took place in her reception chambers now addressed questions about institutional continuity and knowledge preservation rather than immediate policy implementation, as she worked to establish procedures that would maintain governmental effectiveness regardless of changing personnel or political circumstances. Her systematic approach to succession planning demonstrated the same strategic brilliance that had characterized her entire career. The evening ceremonies that concluded each day provided opportunities for reflection on achievements that had seemed impossible when she first entered the imperial court as an obscure performer seeking nothing more than survival in Constantinople's harsh urban environment. The daily evidence of successful transformation provided continuing validation of her belief that individual determination combined with intelligent planning could reshape entire worlds. The quiet hours after midnight, when Theodora finally retired to her private chambers, marked the end of days that were increasingly devoted to ensuring that the remarkable civilization she had helped create would continue flourishing long after her personal story had concluded. The legacy emerging from these final months of intensive work would influence human development for centuries, proving that exceptional individuals could achieve immortality through contributions that transcended their own brief time on the stage of history. The daily rhythm that had once focused on immediate survival and gradual advancement had evolved into comprehensive efforts to preserve and perpetuate achievements that represented the pinnacle of what human civilization could accomplish when guided by wisdom, justice, and unwavering commitment to the welfare of all people, regardless of their circumstances or origins. The morning sun that rose over Constantinople each day now illuminated a world that had been fundamentally transformed through the vision and determination of a woman whose remarkable journey from powerlessness to supreme authority would inspire future generations seeking to create better conditions for human flourishing. The gentle rhythm of Theodora's final year unfolded with the measured cadence of someone who understood that every morning brought both opportunity and the approaching end of an extraordinary chapter in human history. Her daily routine in 548 had acquired an almost sacred quality, as each dawn ritual became a careful balance between maintaining the empire's momentum and preparing for the inevitable transition that would test everything she had built. The pre-dawn hours found her in the palace's eastern tower, where she'd created a private sanctuary overlooking the Bosphorus. Here, surrounded by scrolls and correspondence that arrived throughout the night from every corner of the known world, she would spend those precious quiet moments before the palace stirred to life, reading reports that painted a comprehensive picture of an empire that had been transformed beyond recognition during her 2 decades of influence. These morning solitudes had become increasingly precious as her illness progressed, offering her the clarity of mind needed to process information that would have overwhelmed lesser administrators even in perfect health. The intelligence network she had cultivated over decades continued to function with remarkable efficiency, bringing her detailed assessments of everything from harvest conditions in Egyptian provinces to diplomatic developments in Persian courts. Each report carefully analysed and filed according to systems she had perfected through years of methodical administration. The sunrise ritual that followed these private briefings had evolved into a meditation on the empire's daily rebirth, as Theodora would stand at her tower window, watching the first light illuminate the construction sites, markets, and residential districts that bore witness to the transformation she had orchestrated. The view from her elevated position revealed a city that had become the envy of the known world, its marble facades and golden domes reflecting not just architectural brilliance, but the systematic application of intelligent governance to every aspect of urban life. Her morning descent from the tower to the main palace complex marked the beginning of a daily journey through corridors that had become living museums of her administrative innovations. The walls displayed maps that tracked the implementation of legal reforms across distant provinces, charts that documented the success of agricultural improvements in regions that had once struggled with famine, and artistic renderings of architectural projects that were transforming cities throughout the empire according to principles she had developed through careful study of urban planning. The first formal meeting of each day brought together the small circle of administrators who had learned to function as extensions of her strategic thinking, each individual responsible for monitoring specific aspects of imperial governance that required constant attention despite her reduced physical capacity. These morning conferences took place in a chamber specifically designed for efficient communication, with acoustic properties that allowed quiet conversation to be heard clearly while preventing eavesdropping from outside observers. Her approach to delegation during these morning sessions demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of human psychology that had enabled her rise from obscurity to supreme authority. Rather than simply issuing orders, she would guide discussions that helped her deputies reach conclusions she had already identified as optimal, creating a sense of collaborative decision-making that enhanced their commitment to implementation while ensuring that policies reflected her strategic vision. The morning review of overnight correspondence during these sessions revealed the extraordinary scope of relationships she had cultivated throughout the Mediterranean world and beyond. Letters from Germanic chieftains described the success of trading agreements that were bringing unprecedented prosperity to regions that had once relied entirely on warfare for economic advancement. Reports from Arabian merchants detailed the expansion of commercial routes that were carrying Byzantine manufactured goods to markets in India and Central Asia. The systematic processing of this global intelligence required procedures that pushed the boundaries of what 6th century administration could accomplish. Yet the morning sessions proceeded with clockwork precision, as each piece of information was evaluated for its implications and filed according to systems that would allow future administrators to access accumulated wisdom about international relations, economic policy, and strategic planning. Her mid-morning transition to architectural oversight brought a different rhythm to the day, as Theodora would move through the palace complex to examine construction projects that were nearing completion after years of careful planning and meticulous execution. The Hagia Sophia, now in its final stages of interior decoration, received her personal attention as master craftsmen applied finishing touches to mosaics that would inspire wonder and devotion for centuries to come. These morning inspections revealed her continuing ability to master technical details that impressed even experienced professionals who had initially approached her with skepticism about female involvement in complex engineering projects. Her conversations with master builders during these sessions addressed everything from the acoustic properties of cathedral spaces to the structural implications of innovative dome designs that were pushing the boundaries of what contemporary architecture could achieve. The daily meetings with artistic supervisors during these morning rounds demonstrated her sophisticated understanding of how visual elements could communicate complex political and theological messages to viewers regardless of their literacy or cultural background. Her decisions about color selection, symbolic imagery, and compositional arrangement reflected comprehensive knowledge of how artistic choices could reinforce governmental objectives while creating works of enduring beauty and significance. The late morning hours brought different challenges as Theodora shifted her focus to the diplomatic correspondence that maintained Byzantine relationships with kingdoms and trading partners across 3 continents. Her private study during these sessions resembled the command center of a global intelligence operation, with maps marked by colored threads that trace the movement of ambassadors, the flow of commercial goods, and the shifting alliances that determine the balance of power throughout the known world. Her approach to international relations during these morning sessions emphasized the patient cultivation of a mutual benefit rather than the pursuit of immediate advantage, creating partnerships that had proven remarkably durable even during periods of military conflict or economic disruption. The daily letters she dictated to skilled secretaries addressed everything from technical questions about trade regulations to philosophical discussions about the proper relationship between different forms of governmental authority. The correspondence she maintained with scholarly communities throughout the empire during these morning hours reflected her commitment to preserving and expanding human knowledge, even as her personal involvement in educational administration became more limited by physical constraints. Her letters to university administrators emphasized both practical concerns about curriculum development and theoretical questions about the relationship between learning and effective governance. The noon transition from private correspondence to public ceremonies required Theodora to transform herself from strategic planner to imperial symbol, a daily metamorphosis that demonstrated her continuing mastery of the performance skills that had first brought her to imperial attention decades earlier. The formal dining hall where she received visitors during the midday hours had been designed to showcase imperial grandeur while facilitating the kind of substantive conversation that effective diplomacy required. Her participation in these midday functions combined traditional imperial dignity with the accessibility that had always characterized her approach to governance, creating an atmosphere where foreign representatives felt both honored by imperial attention and comfortable expressing their concerns about policy matters that affected their home countries. The daily conversations that took place during these ceremonial meals often produced more significant diplomatic progress than formal negotiations conducted through traditional channels. The afternoon hours brought military briefings that remained as comprehensive as ever, though the physical demands of these sessions were carefully managed to maximize her effectiveness while conserving energy for other essential responsibilities. The daily reports from commanders throughout the empire provided detailed intelligence about strategic conditions and tactical developments that informed imperial planning for future operations, while documenting the success of military reforms that had strengthened imperial defense capabilities. Her systematic attention to military logistics during these afternoon sessions reflected her understanding that effective strategic planning required comprehensive knowledge of supply systems, transportation networks, and local political conditions that could affect operational success. The daily discussions about equipment procurement, personnel training, and coordination between different types of forces demonstrated her continuing involvement in every aspect of imperial defense planning. The late afternoon meetings with provincial governors, who had traveled to Constantinople for consultation, provided essential opportunities to assess the practical implementation of policies throughout the empire's vast territories. These informal discussions often revealed local adaptations and innovations that improved upon original imperial directives, creating a feedback system that allowed continuous refinement of governmental procedures based on actual experience rather than theoretical speculation. Her evening transition from administrative duties to cultural patronage brought different satisfactions as she reviewed the artistic and intellectual achievements that were making Constantinople the center of medieval civilization. The daily reports about scholarly research, artistic production, and educational progress provided evidence that imperial support for learning and creativity was generating innovations that would influence human development for centuries. The systematic documentation of these cultural achievements during her evening sessions reflected her understanding that governmental success should be measured not just by military victories or economic prosperity, but by contributions to the advancement of human knowledge and artistic expression. Her personal involvement in evaluating scholarly manuscripts and artistic proposals ensured that imperial patronage supported work of genuine merit rather than merely fashionable trends. The quiet hours after formal court functions concluded provided Theodora with essential time for private reflection and strategic planning, as she worked to synthesize the vast amounts of information she absorbed each day into coherent policies and long-term objectives. These solitary moments in her private study became increasingly precious as her illness progressed, offering opportunities for the kind of comprehensive thinking that effective imperial governance required. Her evening correspondence with trusted advisors throughout the empire during these quiet hours addressed the most sensitive aspects of succession planning and institutional continuity, ensuring that the governmental systems she had spent decades perfecting would survive whatever transitions might be required in the coming months or years. The daily letters she dictated during these sessions provided detailed guidance about policy implementation and strategic priorities that would help future administrators maintain the empire's remarkable achievements. The late evening hours, when the palace finally grew still and even the most dedicated servants had retired to their quarters, brought Theodora face to face with the profound questions about legacy and mortality that occupied her thoughts with increasing frequency. Her private chambers during these midnight hours became a sanctuary where she could contemplate the extraordinary journey that had brought her from the hippodrome's dusty floors to the pinnacle of earthly authority. The comprehensive review of her life's accomplishments that occupied these final hours of each day revealed achievements that seemed almost impossible when considered against the humble circumstances of her origins. The legal reforms that had protected millions of vulnerable individuals throughout the empire, the architectural projects that had transformed Constantinople into the most beautiful city in the world, the diplomatic initiatives that had created lasting peace with former enemies, and the cultural renaissance that had attracted talent from every corner of the known world all stood as testimony to what intelligent leadership could accomplish when guided by genuine concern for human welfare. The systematic preparation for her eventual departure from the earthly stage that characterized these midnight sessions reflected her understanding that even the most successful rulers were ultimately temporary custodians of authority that belonged properly to the institutions and peoples they served. Her detailed instructions about policy continuity and administrative procedures provided a comprehensive manual for future governance that would preserve the benefits of her innovations while allowing for adaptation to changing circumstances. The daily rhythm she had maintained for over 2 decades was gradually evolving into something that resembled a carefully orchestrated farewell performance. with each routine refined to ensure maximum effectiveness while acknowledging the physical limitations that were slowly constraining her legendary energy. The morning intelligence briefings, afternoon diplomatic sessions, and evening cultural reviews continued with remarkable consistency. Though the pace had necessarily slowed to accommodate her changing circumstances, her systematic approach to succession planning during these final months demonstrated the same strategic brilliance that had characterized her entire career as she worked to identify and train individuals who could continue the work she had begun while adapting her methods to their own strengths and circumstances. The daily meetings with potential successors emphasized both practical procedures and theoretical frameworks that could guide decision-making in diverse situations. The architectural legacy that was nearing completion during this period would stand as permanent testimony to her vision and determination, with buildings and public spaces that would serve imperial needs while inspiring admiration for generations. The daily supervision of final construction details ensured that these monuments to intelligent governance would reflect the highest standards of craftsmanship and aesthetic achievement. The diplomatic relationships that had developed through years of patient cultivation were now strong enough to survive transitions in imperial leadership. Though she maintained daily oversight of the most sensitive international negotiations to ensure that Byzantine interests would be protected regardless of changing circumstances within the empire itself. Her systematic documentation of negotiation strategies and alliance management provided essential guidance for future diplomatic initiatives. The woman who had once struggled for basic survival in Constantinople's entertainment districts had become the architect of governmental systems that represented the pinnacle of ancient administrative achievement, proving that exceptional individuals could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles through intelligent planning, unwavering determination, and genuine dedication to purposes larger than personal advancement. The morning sun that rose each day over the Golden Horn now illuminated a civilization that had reached unprecedented heights under her guidance, with daily evidence of successful governance visible in every aspect of imperial administration, from the most remote provincial outposts to the magnificent buildings that crowned the capital city. The legacy she was consciously creating through these final months of intensive work would influence human development long after her remarkable personal story had concluded, demonstrating that individual brilliance combined with systematic effort could indeed reshape entire worlds. The quiet hours before dawn brought increasing awareness that her extraordinary journey was approaching its natural conclusion, yet each day still began with the same methodical attention to detail and strategic thinking that had characterized her entire approach to imperial governance. The daily routine that had evolved from desperate improvisation into comprehensive administrative procedures continued to demonstrate what became possible when exceptional intelligence was applied consistently toward objectives that transcended personal ambition to embrace the broader welfare of human civilization itself. The final weeks of June 548 brought an almost ethereal quality to Theodora's morning rituals, as she moved through the palace corridors with the measured grace of someone who understood that each step carried the weight of imperial legacy. Her daily routine had acquired the precision of a master craftsman, putting finishing touches on a lifetime's work, every gesture deliberate and meaningful as she prepared the empire for whatever transitions lay ahead. The dawn hours found her in the palace scriptorium, where teams of skilled scribes worked through the night to copy the administrative manuals and policy guidelines she had been dictating during her evening sessions. These documents represented more than simple governmental procedures. They were comprehensive blueprints for maintaining the sophisticated systems of governance that had transformed the Byzantine Empire into the most advanced civilization of its age. Her morning review of these texts revealed the extraordinary scope of knowledge she had accumulated about every aspect of imperial administration. The systematic organization of imperial records during these dawn sessions reflected her understanding that effective governance required institutional memory that could survive changes in personnel and political circumstances. Each policy decision, diplomatic agreement, and administrative innovation had been carefully documented, with detailed explanations of underlying principles and practical implementation strategies that would guide future administrators long after her personal involvement had ended. Her morning meetings with the palace's head librarians and archivists took on new significance during this period, as she worked to ensure that centuries of accumulated governmental wisdom would be preserved and accessible to future generations. The daily discussions about manuscript preservation, catalogue organization, and copying procedures demonstrated her commitment to creating lasting institutions rather than merely temporary achievements that might disappear with changing political fortunes. The transition from archival supervision to her regular intelligence briefings brought familiar rhythms as messengers continued arriving from across the empire with reports that painted a comprehensive picture of conditions throughout the vast Byzantine territories. The morning analysis of these reports revealed the remarkable stability that had emerged from decades of careful policy development and systematic attention to regional needs and circumstances. Provincial governors from the Balkans described agricultural improvements that were producing unprecedented harvests, while administrators from North African territories reported that legal reforms were reducing social tensions and increasing economic productivity. The daily evidence of successful policy implementation throughout the empire provided continuing validation of her comprehensive approach to governmental administration, demonstrating that intelligent leadership could indeed create lasting benefits for millions of people. Her mid-morning transition to architectural oversight brought different satisfactions as construction projects throughout Constantinople approached their final stages under her watchful supervision. The Hagia Sophia, now ready for its consecration ceremony, stood as the crowning achievement of imperial patronage and artistic excellence, its innovative dome design representing the successful marriage of theoretical engineering principles with practical construction techniques that had pushed the boundaries of what contemporary architecture could accomplish. The daily inspections of other building projects during these morning hours revealed the comprehensive urban transformation that had occurred under her guidance, with new hospitals, schools, markets, and residential districts demonstrating how systematic planning could create living conditions that served both practical needs and aesthetic aspirations. Her conversations with master builders and city planners emphasized the importance of maintaining construction standards and design principles that would ensure these achievements would serve future generations. The late morning hours brought diplomatic correspondence that maintained the complex web of international relationships essential for imperial security and prosperity. Her private study during these sessions continued to function as the nerve center of global intelligence gathering, with reports flowing in from ambassadors, merchants, and military observers stationed throughout the known world, providing comprehensive assessments of political developments and economic opportunities. The systematic processing of international intelligence during these morning sessions required procedures that had evolved over decades of refinement and adjustment, with each piece of information evaluated for its immediate implications and long-term significance before being integrated into the comprehensive understanding of global conditions that informed imperial policy decisions. Her ability to synthesize complex information from diverse sources and identify patterns that might escape less experienced observers remained as sharp as ever, despite her physical challenges. Her midday participation in court ceremonies demonstrated continuing imperial dignity and authority, even as the formal protocols were gradually modified to accommodate her changing circumstances. The daily audiences with foreign representatives and domestic petitioners provided essential opportunities to maintain the accessibility and responsiveness that had always characterized her approach to governance, while ensuring that imperial authority remained visible and effective. The afternoon hours brought military briefings that addressed both immediate security concerns and long-term strategic planning for imperial defense. The daily reports from commanders throughout the empire revealed the success of military reforms that had created more professional, efficient, and effective armed forces capable of defending imperial territories while supporting diplomatic initiatives that promoted peace and stability throughout the Mediterranean world. Her systematic attention to military logistics and strategic coordination during these afternoon sessions reflected her understanding that effective defense required comprehensive integration of different types of forces and capabilities, from traditional infantry and cavalry units to naval forces and siege equipment that could respond to diverse threats and challenges. The daily discussions about training programs, equipment procurement, and coordination between regional commands demonstrated her continuing involvement in every aspect of imperial military planning. The transition to cultural patronage during the late afternoon hours brought opportunities to review the artistic and intellectual achievements that were establishing Constantinople as the center of medieval civilization. The daily reports about scholarly research, artistic production, and educational progress provided evidence that imperial support for learning and creativity was generating innovations that would influence human development for centuries after her reign had ended. Her evening meetings with master artists, musicians, and scholars during this period emphasized both immediate creative projects and long-term institutional development that would preserve and expand the cultural renaissance she had fostered through decades of systematic patronage. The daily discussions about artistic standards, educational curricula, and scholarly research priorities reflected her comprehensive vision of how imperial authority could serve the advancement of human knowledge and creative expression. The formal evening court functions that concluded each day provided opportunities for reflection on achievements that had seemed impossible when she first entered the imperial palace as an unknown performer seeking nothing more than survival in Constantinople's challenging urban environment. The daily ceremonies celebrating artistic, architectural, and administrative accomplishments demonstrated the remarkable transformation that intelligent leadership could accomplish when guided by clear principles and unwavering commitment to the common good. Her participation in these evening functions combined traditional imperial pageantry with the personal warmth and accessibility that had always distinguished her approach to public appearances, creating an atmosphere where both domestic officials and foreign visitors felt genuinely honored by imperial attention, while understanding the serious purposes that underlay ceremonial occasions. The quiet hours after formal court activities concluded brought Theodora to her private chambers for the solitary reflection and strategic planning that had become increasingly precious as her illness progressed. These midnight sessions in her personal study provided essential opportunities to synthesize the vast amounts of information she absorbed each day while contemplating the broader implications of governmental decisions and policies for the empire's future development. Her evening correspondence with trusted administrators throughout the empire during these quiet hours addressed the most sensitive aspects of institutional continuity and succession planning, providing detailed guidance about policy implementation and strategic priorities that would help maintain the empire's remarkable achievements regardless of changing personnel or political circumstances. The daily letters she dictated during these sessions represented comprehensive instruction manuals for effective governance based on decades of practical experience. The systematic documentation of administrative innovations and governmental procedures that occupied these evening hours reflected her commitment to ensuring that future rulers would have access to the accumulated wisdom and practical knowledge she had developed through intensive involvement in every aspect of imperial administration. Her detailed instructions about crisis management, diplomatic negotiation, and policy development provided frameworks that could guide decision-making in diverse and unpredictable circumstances. The late evening meetings with her most trusted advisors during this period focused increasingly on questions of legacy and institutional preservation rather than immediate policy implementation. As she worked to identify individuals capable of continuing her work while adapting her methods to their own strengths and the changing conditions they would inevitably face. These confidential discussions addressed both practical procedures and theoretical principles that could maintain governmental effectiveness during periods of transition. And so our journey through time draws to a gentle close as the last rays of Byzantine sunlight fade over the Golden Horn. Theodora's extraordinary story reminds us that greatness can emerge from the most humble beginnings when intelligence meets unwavering determination. Her transformation from powerless performer to co-ruler of the world's greatest empire stands as eternal proof that individual brilliance, guided by wisdom and compassion, can indeed reshape civilization itself. Sleep well, friend.